press reporter on April 15th, 1935, coined the line. Three little words, achingly familiar on a Western farmer's tongue, rule life in the Dust Bowl of the continent, if it rains. It never did, and that was the start of the Dust Bowl, a phenomenon of the 1930s, also commonly referred to as the Dirty 30s, which was understandable considering the dirty, dusty, harsh living conditions that they had to fight through. Many were affected by this disaster, these storms practically consuming the states of Oklahoma and Texas, but also affecting some of the surrounding states, such as Kansas, Arkansas, and Colorado, and even some of New Mexico. These storms, called black blizzards, were often caused from a mixture of little rain, light soil, and high winds. These were terrible conditions. It was a butterfly effect, really. The drought and heavily worked soil produced small, dry soil particles, which in turn did nothing to help with the high winds that soon followed. Many Dust Bowl residents who inhaled the airborne dust suffered from shortness of breath, asthma, coughing fits, and bronchitis. Many people also contracted dust pneumonia. During this time, it might have been referred to as the brown plague. Just alone, nearly 500 infants, children, and elderly were killed due to their higher susceptibility. The Dust Bowl leaving approximately 500,000 homeless and 2.5 million moving completely out of the state. The largest impact it had, though, was on the livestock. If the livestock was even lucky enough to survive, it would be bought to feed the homeless living in Hoovervilles, sick cattle being purchased for $1 and the healthy for upwards of $16. My point is that this was a devastating time period, ruining, affecting, and taking the lives of many people. This flashback through an American history class that I've just brought you through was to make and prove my point of the importance of farm practices, such as irrigation, crop rotation, and cover crops. If each of these methods had been implemented in every aspect, the Dust Bowl could have been prevented. It could have been far less catastrophic, and it could have saved lives and ultimately prevented the hardships and stress the country was put under. Rain follows the plow was the status quo, so labor was plentiful. Then drought struck, lasting from 1934 to 1937. These states had little to no form of precipitation for 3 years. Dated back to almost as early as the 300 AD, the Hohokam are recognized for being of the first to build the first large-scale irrigation system made of rawhide and basket tools. This version not being nearly as high-tech and innovative as today, but rather simple, and it was still working. It still worked. They maintained thousands of acres for centuries under this idea of irrigation, and even a simple makeshift irrigation system would have helped during the 1930s, not prevented but assisted tremendously to the conditions. The grounds were overworked with the new development of tractors and farm machinery, so fields were being planted year after year with the same crops, with the same type of farm practices. Unfortunately, the same crops means the same root systems year after year. The same form of growth would take place. So if you had a shallow root system, you'd tend to stick with the same shallow root system, which did nothing to pact the soil. Charles Townshend of the 18th century realized that this could result with problems in the future, so he was of the first to develop the 4-field crop rotation. Amongst 4 fields, 4 crops were planted, changing yearly, which provided the farmers with durable, nutrient-filled soil that wouldn't scatter in the wind, unlike the soils of the Dust Bowl. The implementation of a crop rotation would have fabricated stronger soils to withstand these powerful winds. Winds up to 60 miles an hour wreaked havoc on the already poor conditions, picking up the lighter sand and dust and sliding it across the nation, causing friction to build and more soil to be picked up. Some of these storms blacked out the brightest of days. The wind, unfortunately, continued to blow and dried the land even more, which caused more sand to be picked up. When the Great Depression hit during the 1930s, the demand for wheat plummeted. Nobody had any money to buy wheat or any food for that matter. Then the amber waves of grain ceased to exist. They all dried up, turning to barren dust fields, leaving the plains defenseless to the relentless winds. The wheat acted as an anchor, holding the soil solid while entangled in its root structure. A cover crop should have been used to constantly have structure below the surface. If you noticed, each one of these practices needed the next. Without cover crops, there was no need for crop rotation, and without irrigation and water, none of these practices would have been possible. And these weren't things that you could fly by the seat of your pants on. When the Great Depression hit or they saw signs of the Dust Bowl occurring, it wasn't something that they could just implement then and there. It needed to be happening at on a regular basis. And that's why we use these methods now to prevent disaster. As I live and work on my own family farm, I can personally say, without being super dramatic, that we have the weight of the world on our shoulders. We sustain them. We don't want a Dust Bowl Part 2, but in some aspects it was a learning experience, so we study and improve. As it's stated in the Future Farmers of America Creed, in the promise of better days through better ways, even as the better things that we now enjoy have come to us from the struggles of former years. Agriculture was built on this, and this instance in particular is one of those examples. So it's just something that we take and we just learn from our past mistakes. Thank you. So sweep across the room again. Everybody smile, wave.